Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Neville Wright. This video is one in a series that will take you through making a decision on whether to sell your business or whether you will pass the business on to the next generation. For the first 20 years of running a business, I wasn't sure what I'd do. Over the next 15 years, I knew what I would do. I would pass the business on to the children. And then in the last part of the business, in the last couple of the years, I decided at the end to sell it. So that's what I did. I sold my business on the 14th of February 2011 at 2 o'clock. That's when the sale completed. I received £70 million in cash. That day was the worst day of my life, and I'll run through a few things with you. And although people think it's surprising, on one hand you could get 70 million in cash, and the other hand it could be the worst day of your life, and that what you've ever experienced emotionally is quite hard to take in. Well, we had a business called, well, I'll say we. I know I'm speaking to you, and I will refer possibly as I or we or us, but in actual fact it's a partnership. Myself and my wife, and then our two daughters came into the business, and then our son-in-law came into the business. So that gives you an understanding of what I'm talking about then. So we started the business, and it was called Kiddie Care, and it sold nursery products, baby nursery products like prams and cots and kid stuff, toys, clothes, stuff like that. So that was the kind of business it was. And we had a shop, and we had from that shop an internet, and we had 140 people working in that business. But it wasn't always like that. Obviously we started it from nothing, and I'll tell you how I started that business. I have to go back a few years to about 1973-74. There was quite a recession on in those days. 3-day week. If you don't know what a 3-day week is, it means you work 3 days. The power goes off. There's no lights. If you've got a shop, the power will go off. There's no lights. There's no electricity. The petrol was rationed. Nobody collected the bins from your house, and the streets just piled up with rubbish. It was quite grim. Strikes, people going on strike everywhere. So, and people getting laid off. And we had lived in a 10-foot caravan. I say we, myself, my wife, and my daughter. And she was about 3 or 4, and around that age. And that was bad. It was snowing, and it was bad. And if you've ever had a 3 or 4 year old child that wants to go out to play, and it's in the mud and the snow, and you've got a 10-foot caravan, and the only bit of heating is when you put your gas fire on to boil the kettle. That was bad. I mean, we did have running water. I must admit, you know, there was running water, because when we woke up in the mornings, it was so cold, there was water running down the inside of the caravan. It was bad. Anyway, I thought things were bad, and we moved into this house that we got, and then I got made redundant. So they came along and they said, you know, there's a recession and we don't need you anymore. We're closing the plant down, last in, first out, straight away. You've been here a year and 11 months and there's no redundancy, so you're out. So off I trotted to the Dole office, which was so embarrassing in those days. I mean, it's maybe embarrassing now, but it's more common. But it was, I felt dreadful. So I remember I went to the Dole office on my bike, and I hid around the corner, and I counted, because I didn't want to go in, but I counted 20 people going in, and then I counted 20 people coming out, and I rushed through the doors thinking there'd be nobody there, and there was a queue of about 40 people. So I was embarrassed, the same as everybody else, I would imagine. Anyway, things were bad. I didn't get much money, and after a few weeks I went to the counter and I said, look, I've got an idea. I can't get a job. There's no jobs about, but I want to start up in business myself, and I don't think I can make enough money to live on. So could I start this business, tell you each week how much I earn, and then you can deduct it from the dole, and then it will get me going, and eventually I won't need to be on the dole. And the guy, he was about my age, not my age now, but he was about in his 20s, maybe 25, 26, and I think I was 24. And he said, no, you can't do that. You're either on or you're off, one or the other. So I said, well, I don't think I can make I know I can't make a living from a standing start. So I said, is there any way that I can get more money then? Because my mother was feeding us at the time, and it was ridiculous. So he looked at my sheets of whatever information he'd got on me, and he says, you've got one child, haven't you? And I said, yes. And he says, yes, there is a way where you can get more benefit. And I go, what? Right, okay, what is it? What do I do? And he says, you have another child. And I go, are you having a laugh? Are you serious? And he goes, yes. I said, I've just told you, I can't. My mother is feeding the child we've got. I cannot afford to feed us. And you're saying, have another child and I will get more dole. And he says, yes. And I said, look, the government, you being the government, and he wasn't taking this very kindly. He started getting attitude. But I said, look, the government can't look after me. I said, I've had a couple of jobs where they've made me redundant, and so employers are finding a job to look after people, and so that's it. I'll look after myself, thanks very much. I'll look after my own family. And he goes, okay. So he brought out this yellow form, and he says, and he pushed it across the counter. Give me a pen. And he said, you just sign on that line. So I signed on the line. I thought I could be as cocky as you, mate. And then I stood there and we stared at each other, and he goes, "Can I help you?" And I says, what happens now? And he goes, and he's got the piece of paper in his hand, and he says, "You just signed yourself off. You don't have to come back anymore." And a penny dropped, and it hit, and I walked away, and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I got on my bike, and as I was going home, it wasn't raining, but my face was wet. And I thought, oh, what do I tell Marilyn? And when I got home, by the time I'd got home, I'd composed myself and go, I'm not having that. I'm not being told that, and they can't look after me, etc., etc. And what we're going to do, we're going to look after ourselves. And she goes, okay. She didn't understand. We had always wanted to work together. Now we had the opportunity. So I became a salesman. I had a moped, which I immediately sold the next day. Then I had a greenhouse, which I sold to somebody else. Marilyn had got some second-hand furniture a few months before for the house, and I put those in, all that in the sale room. We sold then everything that we could lay our hands on, everything in the garden, everything like the shed, the tools, everything in the house went, and we just Marilyn did a bit of hairdressing at that time. She was a hairdresser, but obviously she didn't work because she got this child and she couldn't get a job. And she did get a little part-time job for 3 or 4 hours a week, and then she did a little bit of hairdressing at home. And anyway, after we said, we've got to do something, so we decided to go into business, and that's what we did. We decided property maintenance business. That sounds good. Okay, so we called ourselves Right Way Decorating and Property Maintenance. And we had a bucket, and my father lent me an old wooden ladder, 2-tier ladder, and Marilyn went to the local shop that sold cloth and bought a yard or a metre of this cloth called scrim. And for those of you who don't know what scrim is, it's an absorbent cloth about this, it's about a metre square, and it absorbs water, and you wring it out and it dries in seconds. So that's what window cleaners use. So she brought this home, and we had a sewing machine, what we hadn't sold, thank goodness for that, and she sewed around the edges because it would fray and then it would just disappear, and we couldn't afford to buy another piece. That was 37 pence, about 37 pence. That was so hey, how to start a business on 37 pence? That's what we did. And I went the next morning to the next door neighbour, knocked on the door, "Do you want your windows cleaning?" I'd already, I knew a couple of window cleaners, and I'd asked them how to do it, what the tricks of the trade were, just a tiny bit of fairy liquid, and make sure you get into the corners of the windows, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's how it started. And the next person, and the next, and the next, and I just walked the streets. Don't get the wrong idea. I walked the streets with a ladder and a bucket and my scrim, and people give me water, and they give me some money. Not a lot, but they give me some money. And the first few days, people started to say, while you're up the ladder, would you clean my gutters out? And I did, but I thought that was all part of window cleaning. But then I soon realised that, hey, I'd spent twice as much on that house cleaning the gutters out as I did window cleaning, so therefore I should be paid. So I started charging for cleaning the gutters. Do you want your gutters cleaning? Well, that's what I would say. I would say, I've cleaned your windows. Do you want your gutters cleaning at the same time? And people go, oh yeah, I'll have those done. And then it got to the point of, do you do other jobs? Yeah, we do anything. And within a few months, unbelievable, we'd got 6 people working in that business. And we'd got a truck, and my mother actually bought me a ladder for my birthday. And in those days, a big ladder, aluminium ladder, it was very expensive, £57. And it was a godsend. I could get up higher, so I could do 3-storey houses instead of just 2. And I still have that ladder, and that's like, I don't know, 37 years later. But the success of that business was purely because we used to say, the answer is yes. And that was the success of the business. The answer is yes. And people go, what do you mean the answer is yes? Well, how can you have a success of a business saying the answer is yes? The answer is yes. Now ask a question. Whatever question it is, whatever you want us to do, the answer is yes. And we ended up, after a while, building extensions for people. And that's how incredible it was. Marilyn used to do painting and decorating and mix concrete and everything there was. Anyway, one day, as the business was growing, she said, look, Neville, I don't really like the building business because people tend to look down on women, and you go into the house and they say derogatory things. It's not nice. I would rather have an office and do the bookwork in the day instead of in the evening, because she was doing the bookwork in the evening and she was doing some hairdressing in the evening and building in the day. And we used to do the building, and everybody used to be clearing up the site, whatever we used to do, and Marilyn used to take the customer around and show them the job, and then if they was happy, which they always were, and we never got a problem, she would type out the invoice and ask for the money. Some people didn't understand that we needed the money, and then they thought maybe a month's time, but we used to put them straight. We used to say, look, on Friday, do you go to the shop and get your groceries? And they used to say, of course we do. And we would answer them by saying, well, we would like to do that this Friday, and we've done the work, so we do need the money to get our groceries. And they go, oh, I understand, and give us the money. One of the things that made us successful as well in the property maintenance business was when somebody wanted a job doing, like the house painting, we used to do that, but we used to do more. We would mend a fence, paint the gates, or do things what they wasn't expecting, and we would do more than we was paid to do, and people would be amazed. Hey, I wanted my house painting, and you've put new letters on my door, and you've painted out the porch, or you've mended the gate, and you've done this. So yeah, that's a gift from us. That's a thank you for giving us the job. within hours, our phone would ring from either a next door neighbour of theirs or a friend or a relation, and we'd get another job. And that's how that business was a success. Anyway, Marilyn says, I need an office. So we found an office in Peterborough. It was a terraced house in a row of terraced houses, which a lot of them had been converted to shops and offices. So that was it. And that was £3,400, I believe, that two up, two down terraced house. And we needed a yard to put the cement mixers and all that kind of stuff in. So that was great. We could use the back garden. Well, before we had got the plans through and got started, Marilyn goes, you know, Neville, it's going to take me 4 hours a day to do the bookwork, and it seems a shame that I can't do something else in the premises, because I don't want to go back on the building sites. I want to keep away from them, but I could do something else. So we did a lot of soul searching and going, what can we do? What can we do? It's a row of shops that we're in. Maybe we could sell something. We didn't know anything about shops, nothing about retail. But what we did know was something about babies and children, because look at the experience we'd got. We'd bought a pram. We'd bought a pushchair. We'd bought a cot. Maybe they were second hand, but we'd bought them. We bought some toys and we bought some clothes. So we were experienced enough to understand. And besides, there was 4 big nursery shops in Peterborough. And Peterborough is a market, or was in those days, a market town with about, I don't know, 60,000 people in it. So there's 4 big nursery shops. And then in those days, every street corner had a little shop, and a lot of them was wool shops that did baby clothes and maybe a few bits of equipment. So there was about 12 other shops really feeding into Peterborough that sold similar sort of things. And we thought, well, if they can make a living, then we'll be all right. We didn't know where to get the products, so we looked in the paper and we saw second hand, people selling their old second hand stuff. So each night we would go out, and we got a little minivan, and we used to go out and buy the second hand goods from people and take them home and to our garage and our house and clean them. And at the time it was quite good, because my mother and father looked after the 4-year-old, so we could go out at night. But they lived with us at the time. They had a problem with our house, it got flooded, so for 6 weeks they was living with us, and you wouldn't believe how cramped up it was. So it was quite a good thing to get out of the house. And so our nights out were going round the streets with the newspaper, knocking on people's doors saying, I want to buy you second-hand prams. So that was it. So we got a shop front on, renovated the shop, put the prams in and started selling them. And it was quite busy. And Marilyn didn't get her bookwork done in the day, so she not only had the shop to run, she had the bookwork for the property maintenance business to do in the evening, she had the bookwork for the shop, and she still did her hairdressing. And when I'd finished on the building sites, I would go to the shop and I would have the shop open until 9 o'clock at night. So that's what our life consisted of, and that's when we started our first shop. And that's the end of, shall we say, part 1, and I will carry on in another session. Thank you. Bye. I know I'm speaking to you, and I will refer possibly as I or we or us, but in actual fact it's a partnership. Myself and my wife, and then our 2 daughters came into the business, and then our son-in-law came into the business. So that gives you an understanding of what I'm talking about then. So we started the business, and it was called Kiddie Care. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Neville Wright. This video is one in a series that would take you through making a decision on whether to sell your business or whether you will pass the business on to the next generation. For the first 20 years of running a business, I wasn't sure what I'd do. Over the next 15 years, I knew what I would do. I would pass the business on to the children. And then in the last part of the business, in the last couple of the years, I decided at the end to sell it. So that's what I did. I sold my business on the 14th of February 2011 at 2 o'clock. That's when the sale completed. I received £70 million in cash. That day was the worst day of my life, and I'll run through a few things with you. And although people think it's surprising, on one hand you could get 70 million in cash, and the other hand it could be the worst day of your life, and that what you've ever experienced emotionally is quite hard to take in. Well, we had a business called, well, I say we, and it sold nursery products, baby nursery products, like prams and cots and kid stuff, toys, clothes, stuff like that. So that was the kind of business it was. And we had a shop, and we had from that shop an internet, and we had 140 people working in that business. But it wasn't always like that. Obviously we started it from nothing, and I'll tell you how I started that business.